Russia launched over 1,600 drones, 1,200 guided bombs, and approximately 70 missiles at Ukraine in 1 week. And in most of these, he successfully hit his targets. The Russian army has a 96% success rate, especially in attacks on the Odessa region. This also shows that Russia is doing very special work in planning for Odessa. The Ukrainian army's defense line in this region has almost collapsed, and Russia is very close to taking full control of the strategic port city. As tensions rise again in the Black Sea with these operations, the Moscow administration describes the attacks as necessary military moves. From Russia's perspective, Odessa has long been Ukraine's most critical logistics hub on the Black Sea. This port city, where ammunition, fuel, and military equipment provided by NATO are distributed inland, is considered a legitimate strategic target for Russia. A frequent emphasis in statements from the Russian Ministry of Defense is, the operations being carried out are high-precision strikes aimed at systematically reducing Ukraine's war capabilities. The Kremlin argues that these strikes only target military facilities, fuel depots, radar systems, and logistics infrastructure, and that efforts are being made to avoid civilian casualties and damage to infrastructure. Odessa's symbolic and historical significance also holds an important place in Moscow's narrative. Russian military experts, calling the city Ukraine's gateway to the West, interpret the targeting of this port infrastructure as a strategic necessity. The weapon systems used are also part of this narrative. The use of hypersonic Kinzhal missiles is presented by the Russian Ministry of Defense as proof of technological superiority and the ability to unerringly destroy targets. The drone attacks are reportedly planned to wear down Ukraine's radar and air defense positions. Russia's official statements convey the message that operations will continue as long as the region's military importance persists. The Kremlin views Odessa as one of the main arteries of Ukraine's war machine and considers cutting off this artery vital to the course of the war. Ukrainian accusations that civilian infrastructure has been damaged are described by Russian officials as Western-backed disinformation. In conclusion, the attacks on Odessa are, according to Russia, not just about gaining control on the ground, but also about justified and necessary military operations aimed at collapsing Ukraine's military supply lines. From Moscow's perspective, these moves are seen as logical steps toward establishing decisive superiority on the southern front and achieving ultimate military objectives. Actually, these developments show us this. Russia has captured Odessa. Even though this hasn't been officially announced yet, it has effectively happened. Retired colonel and military expert Anatoly Matvichuk believes that Odessa could officially come under Russian control by early 2026. According to his assessment, if Russia's potential advance along the Black Sea coast continues for a while longer, Ukraine will lose all of its military power in this region. In fact, the recent developments and reports released seem to confirm what the colonel said. Recent data released by the Russian Ministry of Defense indicates a critical turning point across the entire line of contact, particularly on the Odessa front. Units of the Ukrainian armed forces have begun to surrender or retreat in increasing numbers in recent weeks. This situation reveals that despite the billions of dollars in military, financial, and intelligence support the Kiev regime has received from NATO, it has lost its will and capacity to fight. Russian officials and defense analysts interpret these developments as the inevitable result of the Ukrainian army's moral and logistical collapse. It is reported that Ukrainian positions under continuous air attacks and artillery fire from Russian forces in the direction of Odessa have seen a significant number of soldiers lay down their arms in the last week. Similar cases of surrender are also being reported in the directions of Donetsk, Avdiivka, and Kharkiv. Military and diplomatic circles in Moscow claim that the reaction observed in NATO countries to the surrender of Ukrainian soldiers was more anger and deep disappointment. According to Russian analysts, Western countries have lost patience with the massive resources, military training, and intelligence support they have poured into Kyiv for years, which have failed to produce the expected resistance on the front lines. According to reports, NATO members view the Ukrainian army's tendency to surrender as evidence that their military investment is being wasted, and that Kyiv lacks the will to fight. Kremlin spokesman emphasized that the main reason behind this wave of surrenders is that Ukrainian soldiers are being sent to their deaths for the Kyiv regime and their disappointed Western patrons in a meaningless war. In a statement from the Russian Ministry of Foreign Affairs, it was said, By arming and provoking Ukraine, NATO is essentially doing nothing more than driving the Ukrainian people and soldiers into a meat grinder. Every tank, every bullet sent only increases the duration of the conflict and the number of victims. The Ukrainian military is realizing this and choosing the only realistic way to survive: surrender. The West's anger at this reality is an expression of their own failures and miscalculations, it was said. The Russian military command is sharing with the public that surrendered soldiers are being treated in accordance with international law. The wounded are receiving medical attention, and they are being allowed to communicate with their families. It is estimated that this application encourages more military personnel to surrender along the front line. According to Moscow, the quality or quantity of weapons provided by the West does not change a fundamental fact. The Ukrainian army is exhausted in terms of personnel, ammunition, and motivation. The Russian side claims that NATO ammunition convoys sent to Ukraine have been hit. Supply lines have been cut by attacks on warehouses, and as a result, soldiers at the front are left unarmed and hopeless. It is emphasized that NATO's anger is an indication of its inability to stop this desperation and the collapse of its own geopolitical project. In conclusion, the phenomenon of surrender on the Ukrainian fronts in Russia's reading is the most concrete indicator of the strategic transformation in the course of the war. It is emphasized that it is no longer meaningful for the Kiev administration and its now impatient and angry Western supporters to force the Ukrainian people and soldiers to make further sacrifices. While Moscow presents the surrender of soldiers as an act of common sense and the first step toward ultimate peace, it sends the message that each new NATO aid package and outburst of anger only deepens the tragedy. We constantly follow the developments on the front lines for you. The Russian Okhotnik Special Forces Detachment destroyed a Ukrainian Armed Forces transport platform carrying ammunition to its positions in the Konstantinovsky direction with a precision kamikaze drone attack. Both the cargo and the platform were successfully destroyed. UAV teams from the Expendables Brigade of the Russian Armed Forces neutralized a Ukrainian infantry group as a result of attacks launched with FPV drones on personnel of the 425th Skala Regiment of the Ukrainian Armed Forces in the Pokrovsk direction. In the direction of Zaporizhia, the crew of the Yermak/Korets unmanned aerial vehicle, part of the Russian forces, located and neutralized the Ukrainian Armed Forces hexacopter drone, identified as Baba Yaga just before takeoff. Victory belongs only to those who are prepared. Ukrainian Armed Forces soldiers, who were discovered unprepared in an open area in the direction of Sumy, were neutralized by regular attacks carried out by Russian PFV drone operators. We continue with an attack on a Ukrainian drone crew using the precision tracking methods of the Russian Armed Forces Intelligence Service. From the moment the Ukrainian Armed Forces drone crew reached their positions near the village of Kalyivka in the Sumy region, Russian reconnaissance drones continuously tracked them. The intended target was not a Ukrainian drone or its operator. The Russian drone operators performed flawlessly, keeping the Ukrainian soldiers unaware of the situation until they reached their positions. The Russian drone crew then carried out a precision strike, striking an ammunition depot, and the explosion destroyed all three structures. Meanwhile, the drone they launched was reportedly successfully shot down. Two large air defense systems belonging to the Ukrainian forces were destroyed by a series of Fab 500 bombs dropped by Su-34 jets belonging to the Russian Air Force near the village of Vilcha in the Kharkiv region. Russian drone operators are denying the Ukrainian armed forces any opportunity in the Kupiansk region. Having identified a Ukrainian drone launch site in a forested area, Russian drone operators approached with a high-explosive FPV drone and attacked the site. The explosion was quite powerful. Pecheneg Dam, Kharkiv Oblast. Our drone operator takes off to conduct a search and spots a boat moving on the water. The drone follows a combat course, and at the last moment, the operator realizes the boat isn't carrying soldiers, but ordinary fishermen, who wave their arms wildly. The drone turns away, and the fishermen celebrate their second birthday. Daily life in war. A German-made Panzerhaubitze 2000 artillery system belonging to the Ukrainian armed forces was spotted by Russian reconnaissance drone operators in the Kramatorsk region. Ukrainian crews hoped to camouflage the artillery system under cover of fog. However, reconnaissance units from the Russian southern forces following them had already located them. Unmanned systems units from the 1st Volunteer Reconnaissance and Assault Brigade of the Russian forces then responded, and another Western-made artillery system was reduced to rubble on Ukrainian soil. Assault detachments from the 139th Regiment, Vostok Group of Forces, of the 29th Combined Arms Army of the Russian Armed Forces rapidly deployed to Ukrainian Armed Forces bunkers in the Dnipropetrovsk region using motor vehicles, demonstrating how to clear the bunkers and surrounding areas. Attacking Ukrainian strongholds in forested areas, the motorized units first flanked Ukrainian forces using ATV maneuvers and advanced toward the fortifications. Many Ukrainian bunkers were cleared or destroyed during these attacks. In the Kupiansk direction, Ukrainian armed forces units decided to hide their equipment in an isolated location, but Russian FPV operators continued to detect and destroy them one by one. Released footage showed attacks on armored vehicles. Soldiers from the 16th Russian Special Forces Brigade are continuing their operations. A drone launch point, identified as belonging to the Ukrainian Armed Forces, was destroyed in a precision strike in the direction of Krasnolimansk. Ukrainian military strength continues to weaken along the Krasnolimansk line. FPV UAV operators from the 16th Separate Special Forces Brigade of the Russian Armed Forces identified another Ukrainian launch site in the direction of Krasnolimansk. The FPV drone operators launched an attack and destroyed the Ukrainian launch site. The Russian Swarog Group's drone crews once again continued to effectively launch attacks on Ukrainian forces in the Konstantinovsky direction. This time, their targets were artillery systems of the Ukrainian armed forces. Using fiber optic drones, drone operators detected and accurately hit a mortar and a D-30 howitzer. A disabled British Husky TSV armored vehicle belonging to the Armed Forces of Ukraine in an area of the Northern Military District. Russian Air Force jets used ODB-1500 volumetric bombs to destroy the UAV control center of the 100th Air Assault Brigade of the Armed Forces of Ukraine, located in the village of Pleshchevka in the Konstantinovskoye direction. A Swedish CV-90 infantry fighting vehicle, IFV, belonging to the Armed Forces of Ukraine, was destroyed near Myropol, Sumy Oblast, in a series of attacks carried out by fiber-optic FPV UAVs belonging to Russian KVN crews. Despite official deliveries of 50 units, the Ukrainian armed forces lost over half of their armored vehicles during the war. Russian FPV drone operators destroyed a bunker containing 3 Ukrainian soldiers on the Zaporizhia line. The militants, who were waiting inside the bunker, were neutralized by a powerful strike by a Russian drone. Footage of combat operations by Russian severe drones in Sumy Oblast has been released. The strikes destroyed a KVN-23 FPV drone crew from the 106th Airborne Division of Ukrainian Forces, a Humvee combat armored vehicle, an ATV, a Baba Yaga hexacopter, and a Ukrainian personnel shelter. The impact of 3 Russian Fab 500 aerial bombs used in the attack near the Oskol River crossing in Kupiansk-Uzlovy in the Kharkiv region was captured on camera by FPV drone operators. In the Pokrovsk direction, Russian armed forces units continued to push back Ukrainian troops and successfully advance, occupying defensive positions. Rapid advances require the rapid and sustained supply of ammunition, equipment, medical supplies, and the evacuation of the wounded. Aerial footage of an attack using the Tornado S MLRS on a dam in the Pecheneg region of the Kharkiv region has been released. The attack reportedly caused significant damage to the dam. In the direction of Krasnolimansk, the driver of a Max Pro armored vehicle belonging to the Ukrainian Armed Forces was so frightened by a drone belonging to the Okhotnik Special Forces unit of the Russian 51st Guards Combined Arms Army that he lost control and crashed into a crater created by the explosion. The experienced drone operator, unforgiving of the Ukrainian driver, neutralized the vehicle and its entire crew. In the direction of Sumy, FPV drone operators from the Russian armed forces destroyed a large Ukrainian infantry vehicle carrying Ukrainian forces soldiers on final approach after persistent pursuit. Russian armed forces Mi-28NM crews carried out an attack with helicopter gunships on a Ukrainian armed forces manpower and armored equipment cluster located in the Kursk region border area. A Russian reconnaissance drone crew records an enemy infantry fighting vehicle carrying Ukrainian soldiers advancing on Russian positions. At the command center, officers on duty transmit coordinates to units within the target's kill zone. As soon as the box rounded the corner, an ATGM crew from the Russian 31st Motor Rifle Regiment targeted it. A single round effectively destroyed it. The Ukrainian soldiers inside the vehicle weren't immediately sure why the vehicle had collapsed. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to follow and watch our next videos.